Hello and welcome to this week's book club episode of Star Wars Dark Disciple by Christie Golden. We're going through this novel a couple of chapters at a time to break down the themes and happenings as we go through it. Check out the description of this video if you want to go back to the beginning of this book or say the other books we have done as a series. Today we are discussing chapters 7, 8, and 9. Chapter 7 picks up right where we left off. Ventress and Quinlan are outside of the apartment with the bounty they have been tracking, and they go inside and find the family. We start in Vos's point of view, and it's definitely tough for him. He's very conflicted, because obviously he understands the importance of the mission. He has to get on Ventress's good side so they can go after Dooku. There's also just the inevitability that what was happening was going to happen anyway with Ventress on her own. She certainly didn't need him. Is he actually causing anything to happen that wouldn't have happened if he was not there to interfere at all? But he sees that Moregi, the guy they've been chasing, has a family. He cares a lot about this family. It's pointed out that the child in the apartment is not biologically his, but he is as concerned about this child as much as he would be a biological child. That is the level of commitment he has to this family. He really considers himself the father to this child, and Vos finds that very admirable. He also knows where the money that Moregi stole came from, that it came from a bunch of bad people. You know, he didn't steal a bunch of money from some fish nuns. He took money from bad people to help, raise this family that he has. He did technically commit a crime. He just committed a crime against other criminals, and he knows that things are not going to go well for this guy. So he's conflicted because he sees that this is kind of a decent person, and that he recognizes that not everybody has the privilege he had within the Jedi. And I think this is an important thing for Vos, because I've kind of mentioned how he has that kind of adventure and excitement Jedi arrogance about him, that he has this kind of cavalier attitude. Of course, we see that to some degree that's a front or a defense mechanism for the kind of things he has to do, and in a lot of ways it's what makes him really good at what he does. But I think to counterbalance that, to keep him from being completely headed down the arrogant line, it's good that he recognizes that, the Jedi actually have a lot. There's a lot he has just from the nature of being raised on Coruscant. And so I just thought that was a good counterbalance point. It is a rough part of the novel. They do eventually catch Moregi outside, so Vos bungles it just enough so that they have to go outside the apartment again. That way nobody in the apartment gets hurt. The family would in theory be fine. But then they do actually catch him. Ventress is still trying to figure out what she wants to do about Vos and if she's going to trust him. And this sends her down a very dark memory lane, that she realizes how many people in her life that she's lost. She's lost her other Night Sisters. She's lost Mother Talzin, all these people that she's cared about. Her Jedi Master, Narek, she doesn't really have anybody left except Dooku, who's tried to kill her. The only person left in her life is this very toxic person for her. And so she's kind of looking for a chance to not be alone. She plays herself off as this loner character, and you'd almost expect her to be if you didn't know her backstory. But then we see that she does want some kind of companionship to some degree, and this is somebody who apparently really wants to be there. She definitely thinks that there's more to Vos than he's showing. She's not stupid. But that's also, I think, what intrigues her. As I read through this, I'm like, why would Ventress want the character that Vos is portraying with her? It makes no sense. It makes sense that she would want somebody with her, but it doesn't make sense that she would go for a bumbling idiot as she thinks of him. But I think it's this idea that she knows there's something more to him that he's not showing, and maybe that's something she can relate to. Maybe that's something she finds interesting. She certainly doesn't feel him a threat. There's a connection to the character of Pluma Sodi, which is from the Bounty. I think the episode's just called Bounty, from the Clone Wars. It's during the time Ventress is a bounty hunter, and I think it's in the Reiko Hardeen arc where Obi-Wan's undercover. But anyway, it's from her time working with Boba and company. So it's just a cool reference. Ventress does agree to partner with Vos. Vos is playing the attracted card. As Ventress walks up the ramp, he's gawking at her. She shuts that down immediately and seems unconcerned by it. I still kind of wonder if he really needed to do that. If Vos needed to lean into that as much, would Ventress have found it unusual if he wasn't? Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it's just a part of the dynamic between them. which is one of those classic tropes, if you can kind of guess where this is going. That's really the beginning of their partnership. Ventress is now full on, she wants to figure this guy out. And we go to chapter 8, and chapter 8 starts out pretty humorously. Ventress intends to train Vos, and Vos doesn't want to. He's got a little bit of that, like, okay, look, I'm a Jedi Master, I know what I'm doing, but he can't say that. So she challenges him to a sparring match, and if he wins, then he doesn't have to train. Of course, he struggles because he can't use the Force, and he can't show that part of himself. So he holds his own pretty well, considering she's using the Force handedly, but she trounces him. And they start training, and what I thought was good is he's actually really, he comes to appreciate what Ventress shows him, and he says, you know, at the end of the day, it does make sense. She was trained by Dooku. She has skills that he can learn. But what I found interesting about that, then, is Ventress is teaching him probably neutral things, right? Physical conditioning and, like, actual combat skills. She's not teaching him, like, dark side things. She's not like, find the deep, dark, angry part of yourself and use that when you kick people, you know? Because if that was what she was teaching him, he would have a problem with that. I don't know if that's because she doesn't think Vos has the Force at this point in time, so there's no point in teaching him that kind of philosophical stuff, or maybe she's already at a point, I mean, she's using the Force, she's still... mostly, I would say at this point she's more of a dark sider than a light sider, but she's just not, like, out to destroy everyone kind of dark side. She's not, like, actively seeking the advancement of the dark side anymore. She just uses it, but I feel like she's trying to probably be more neutral at this point. I just found that to be something that's kind of interesting. The book continues to emphasize the point that Vos is learning how to not use the Force. And this makes me think of the Dark Tide books in the New Jedi Order, which are Legends books. In that universe, for those who don't know, the Solos have 3 children. Their youngest is named Anakin Solo, and he's learning with his aunt, Mara Jade, who's currently Luke's wife. She's teaching Anakin the importance of not relying on the Force to do menial tasks, like learning to find your strength without it, so that you can be stronger when you do use it. And so, even though it's not necessarily a direct correlation, it's just that kind of thing that I think about, of how many Jedi rely on the Force so much, because there's no reason why they would ever not have it. So I just enjoy any story where it's about a Jedi kind of getting their hands dirty and, like, learning how to have their own strength and not using the Force for everything. Not because they don't want to, like, not to not commune with it, not to withdraw from the Force, but to kind of find their own center so that they can really appreciate what the Force does within them. This leads to an exchange while he's doing handstands, and Ventress is, like, pushing on his legs as he's doing handstands, and it's just kind of a humorous way. They're just kind of standing and talking in this physically close way, but in a way that's not necessarily a point of vulnerability at the same time, if that makes sense. And Ventress is describing their next job. They've been doing different bounties, like bounty runs together. Vos is, like, strategically showing her all the stuff he's learned on, like, each mission. I can picture a montage there of, she's like, kick this way, and then he goes on the thing and he kicks someone that way, and then they share a nod, like that kind of a thing. But they're just here having this exchange. She talks about how they're going after somebody who's a bit of a womanizer, but promiscuous, and so she says that they're gonna lure him in with the nod and the wink, and she shows off her flirtation skills, he shows off his lack thereof, and it's just kind of a cute exchange. And Vos keeps running into this problem where he's trying to play the flirtatious side and giving her those invitations that he actually doesn't want to follow through on at this point at all, that he is doing to be a part of the character, and he keeps having these scares that she might concede one day and, like, want something in return, and what he would do about that. And I think that kind of continues up until this point, where she does her nod and her wink, and then she wants to see Vos try to be flirtatious, and he can't really follow up on it. And she has this line of, your virtue is safe with me, which Vos, in his mind, says that he didn't even want to touch that one. I took that line as Ventress is aware that Vos's advances are a bit more bravado than they are serious, and that maybe they're compensating not for not in a typical male compensation sort of way. Virtue just makes me think that the idea that he hasn't been around town very much, but is trying to act like he is, and that she's aware of it, and that doesn't actually bother her, which is an interesting exchange. And I could maybe, maybe I'm interpreting that a different way, but that's how I took it. And then she says that she finds his discomfort charming. At a point where he's not playing the bravado is the point where she finally, like, will compliment him on his personality. And I think that's just also because she's seeing real Vos at that point. Vos's character is failing to who Vos really is. And what his real insecurities are. That whole exchange is longer than the actual description of going after the bounty, because apparently she winks and nods and catches the guy in 15 minutes flat. Then we go to Ventress start thinking about how she's growing fond of having Vos, and how she's fond of having a partnership over a master-servant kind of relationship, right? She had a Jedi master, and she was a learner. She had a Sith master, and she was a learner. She was a master to Savage Opress. With her and Mother Talzin, that was still not an equal relationship, and that she hasn't had a lot of partnerships in her life. And how different this feels. And I kind of wonder, too, if that's part of why she went right into training Vos. Maybe not so much out of thinking he really needed it. I mean, he was kind of downplaying his skill, so maybe that was part of it, too. But I think that kind of relationship is what's comfortable to her. And I think that when she's inviting somebody she doesn't know very well into her life and onto her ship, going into the relationship she's used to would be what she'd want to do. So she would want to go into the teacher role because she's used to master-servant, and she doesn't want to be the servant. So she's going to assert herself as the master from the get-go. And now she's realizing that it doesn't really have to be that way, that it can be like this. That wasn't necessarily spelled out, but to me it was implied enough that I thought that was an interesting change in her behavior. Vos gets her drinking, and they have an exchange. We find out after this exchange that Vos was never really drunk because he trained himself to have a high alcohol tolerance, as would be useful for his jobs. But he's playing very drunk, but even though he's playing drunk, his emotional journey is real. He's just trying to get information out of Ventress, and Ventress isn't sharing, and she starts asking him about, like, who are you, where you're from, what's your story, and he's not convinced he has one, that he's a series of events, but not anything that forms into a narrative. And she says that, she has a story, but it's all sad, terrible things. And he asks this really important question of what's worse, to have no story at all or to have only a sad story. And I think that's a hard question, because I think if you're somebody who only has a bad story, you would wish to have no story, to not have this weight of horrible things that have happened to you, and to have that relieved. And if you're the person that has no story, you tell yourself, well, at least if I have a bad story, I have a story. That's better than literally nothing. At least something will have happened. Whether or not one of those is truly greener, it is one of those greener on the other side kind of questions, and is kind of the core question between the two of them. And it's an interesting to think about, because it's hard for me to imagine a Jedi not having a story, especially one like Quinlan, who does all of this cool stuff, but it's certainly plausible that he would see himself that way, since he's a Jedi that's mostly in the shadows, mostly doing covert things that people will never really know what he does. He's not Anakin Skywalker or Obi-Wan Kenobi, where their tales of heroism will be told. Nor do I think Vos really minds that, per se, other than it just occurs to him suddenly that he doesn't have a story. He goes back to his bunk. He's still playing drunk, has Ventress help him back, but he wasn't. But he suspects that she's as shaken as he was by the question. Chapter 9 starts out with Vos meeting with Kenobi again. The council is impatient. Kenobi is kind of pushing him, but he's there in person, and I like that he puts his hand on Vos's shoulder briefly, just to as close as two Jedi bros can come to sharing affection. Vos meditates. I like that he's learned how to meditate in like a busy place. I think that's probably more useful than learning how to meditate in a quiet place, but And as he's meditating, he questions what he owes to the Jedi, what he owes in service of the people who raised him and have given him all of this privilege that he knows he has. What does he owe to Ventress, somebody he's lying to and using, but not really using her to do anything she didn't want to do, right? She's leading in bounty hunting. They're going where she wants to go. She would want to kill Dooku. It's just a matter of getting her to believe they can handle it. So, he's lying to her, but he's not lying to her about, to make her do something against her will. And what does that mean? And what does he owe himself? And that's a big question the Jedi wrestle with, because it's not a question that Jedi are encouraged to ask. So then we head over to Ventress's perspective. Ventress sees Vos come back, and he's bought supplies with her money, and she's surprised at herself for trusting that she could give him her money, and he'd go off and actually come back and doing what he was supposed to do. She said that they have a new job, so they go in to talk about it, and quietly admits to herself that she would actually miss Vos if he was no longer there. So they're starting to bond. They go see the Pikes. The Pikes have appeared in the Clone Wars a couple of times, especially in the Lost missions, which was the Netflix season, and then a little bit in the final season with the Ahsoka episodes, with the Martez sisters as well. So we've seen the Pikes around, and they seem even sketchier than usual, and this is when we find out that the family of the leader of the Pikes has been kidnapped. The Black Sun is making a move, has kidnapped them. The leader of the Pikes wants to make a show of strength. His own people won't go. They're more content to have the Pikes, like, be in power and have their leader lose their family, which makes me wonder a little bit about how this power structure works anyway. So the head of the Pikes is trying to make this power play and wants these two bounty hunters to come in and save the day. Vos speaks a bit out of turn and probably out of suspicion as to why not go get the family back themselves, which is when the leader explains why, but Ventress seems a little bit upset about that. Ventress does not want Vos, like, out-promising their hands, like, over-promising their hands, saying, like, oh yeah, we'll absolutely get your family back. She's like, yeah, if they're still alive, shut up. You know, that's that sort of thing that they need to navigate. So these 3 chapters were really the formation of their partnership. You know, it was the end of chasing after Moragi, them kind of getting to know each other, them kind of forming their bond, and now the early stages of their bond are there. And in the next couple of chapters, we're going to see that bond play out as we actually see them go on a mission together instead of, like, the big montage sequence, or at least that's, as I understand it, what we're going to see. We're going to go ahead and read 3 chapters again, so we're going to read chapters 10, 11, and 12 for next week. I would love it if you leave me a comment on what you're thinking of the story so far. If you're not already, follow us on all of the socials, and I will talk to you guys next week.